Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope you have had a great week in cycling land. It's been so much stuff happening on so many fronts in cycling at the moment. It's been a really sort of fun week or two. I've been having a belter of a time because my awesome retail manager Andrew took a couple of weeks leave, so thankfully he's back next week. But it has been a holy Batman busy couple of weeks, especially since if you hadn't seen the second GCN video that was done with myself when they were down here for the Tour Down Under. That was released during the week. So if you haven't seen that, I will try to remember to put a link to that video in there. But yeah, just the extra views of like a GCN vid, we get a whole bunch more stuff coming through, especially like inquiries and comments and so on. And so just in general, it's been a mega week trying to cover Andrew's work and my work, plus a bit of a bump in volumes overall. I've been slightly buried. And so today, I've started super early today. I had a 4 a.m. kickoff. I try to get myself unburied a bit on a few things, plus get the groovy sort of low friction Friday video out, and then heading off to the movies this afternoon because my lovely wife's got the day off. So we're very excitedly going to see Dune 2. I absolutely loved the first one. I thought that was a cinematic masterpiece, and so very excited to zoom off to that about mid-afternoon. So I will be zooming through this and then kicking off the long weekend. All right, first as always, let's cover some quick low friction news. By quick, I mean not quick. Let's do a couple of bits of low friction news. Alrighty, mini test update first. So I've reached the end of block 2 for the test on the Ceramic Speed wet conditions lubricant. And whilst it's not poor by, I guess, any stretch really, but it's not really matching its own, say, the Ceramic Speed, the all conditions lubricant, which really is one of the all-time best drip lubricants that we've tested to date. So in outright wear rate terms, it's multiple times greater wear to this point. So it's I guess a fair way behind. We're testing it in dry conditions so far, and this is a wet conditions specific lubricant, so we're not really in the wet conditions test block yet where this is what it's designed to do. So by the time we get there, it'll be interesting to see how it does go. But I have concerns, as I think I touched on last week, that this main test I don't think is going to be very indicative of the product for what it is designed for, and that really we're going to, I guess, get the best assessment of this product when I test it in the extreme conditions single application longevity test and compare it to other lubricants that have been put through that particular test. So that'll be I think the main benchmark for this one. Really what this test is, I guess, telling us is that it really is designed, I think, and its test brief is for cyclists to use this for when they are going to be riding out in the wet, and not as your just general training and riding lubricant. And we'll switch across to a picture and you'll get more of an indication as to why I would strongly, I guess, not recommend this as your daily training lube, and that it really is just for you to prep for wet conditions, because it is gunking up really quite badly already. So at the end of just, I guess, the first 2 blocks of testing, this is where we're at. So this is really about as gunked up as we've seen a chain this early into a test. The instructions for Ceramic Speed are that you don't wipe the excess of this one after you apply it. So we're basically applying to the top and the bottom span, and then we are sort of massaging it in a little bit with our fingers, and then we need to leave that to set as opposed to wiping excess. Once it is set, you can't wipe this off at all. At best, you're just going to smear some stuff around. So we can see that you can't even find, if you wanted to remove the chain, you can't even find where the master link is. This pulley wheel is now, it's more aero, I guess. It's a nice solid disc of wax that's put on there. So for making pulley wheels more aero, this is the top lube. This gunking up here probably isn't super aero though, so it's offsetting itself. But yeah, overall that's a mess after just 2,000 Ks in. So I certainly wouldn't be able to live with that as my sort of just general training lube. So it really is honing this one down as even before we get to, I guess, just the wet condition side of the testing, that really you could only, I think, look to use this product as a wet condition specific riding lubricant, and not your daily go-to. And next up, I have kicked off the test for the 3-in-1 general purpose. This one's actually just the Singer oil. They're actually out of the 3-in-1, so I think they're probably pretty similar stuff, but both of them are kind of just that cheap oil that you can buy from most supermarkets or hardware stores. So this was $6.95. And so far it's going, certainly not bad. And it's really quite light, so it has actually stayed quite clean. It's a lot more impressive than a lot of commercial bike-specific drip lubricants or wet lubricants that were already quite dirty and notably higher wear after just block 1. So it's not matching the best wet lubricants that have been tested. But after block 1, it is sitting in 20th place overall. Obviously, block 2, once we start to add contamination, so obviously the indoor test trainer is not a mimic for outdoor, even sort of dry road cycling, really. But, it's a good indication of just its outright performance in perfect conditions. But as we now look to, we'll be kicking off block 2 next week. Once we start adding contamination, we'll see how this general purpose oil goes up against some, much more expensive products designed, apparently, for riding on your bicycle chain. Yes, this one's going to be, I guess, it's overall a fun benchmark test for commercial products. A little bit like the candle wax test for the immersive waxes. And that obviously if you're a wet drip lubricant and if you're sort of either beaten or resoundingly beaten by just some $6.95 general purpose or 3-in-1 from your hardware store or supermarket, then that's not a great advertisement for you. So, and I'm pretty positive, obviously there will be some fairly fancy and pretty expensive wet lubricants that will not come close to this just basic oil that you can get, which will be, I think, very disappointing for them. Conversely, there will be some of the top wet lubricants tested that I think are going to be showing their stripes as the test gets harder, that they'll be well ahead, but we'll see. Good kickoff so far, though, for the Singer oil. Right, next up, a bit of media watch again. So thank you. I've been sort of flagged through to this particular video by Cade Media on waxing. Now, I have actually watched a fair bit of Cade Media stuff over the last probably 6 months, and generally I found it really good. This one, though, definitely a bit of a miss. Let's have a bit of a listen and see what they said about waxing, and I think we've got a fairly good counter to a lot of what they have said here. But it's still really interesting, despite the overall great information trend getting better in this space. Sometimes it still seems like, I guess, negative information is put out by people that really haven't been using it or had the experience with it, and are going off mostly, I guess, gut feel, myths, misconceptions, and just sometimes, I think, flat out giving out incorrect information based on lack of experience. So let's have a listen, and I'll interject as needed. It's not that long, but I think this one's worth running through.
We have an email from Jordan titled, "To wax or not to wax?" It seems like I'm being bombarded by content about how great running a wax chain is for road cycling. Is running a wax chain all it's cracked up to be? Maybe just for a longevity of components perspective? Well, surely this is one for you, Nick.
I'm a naysayer to wax. There's a massive issues with wax. I mean, I get that they can talk about it being cleaner, they can talk about and making components last longer, but both of those situations are in ideal world situations in terms of you properly treat the chain, you properly wax it, and you properly stay on top of the wax.
All right, so it's an interesting start. I don't know why, say, I guess the initial properly treating the chain, which I gather he means cleaning, would be classed as a massive issue. That is something that, whether you're immersive waxing or just using a good wet or wax drip lube, you should be properly cleaning the chain to begin with anyway, to get the factory grease off. Yes, of course you can just put stuff over the top, but the results will certainly not be as optimal as if you remove the factory grease. And you'll pretty much see from most, I would say, I guess, of the best or most responsible manufacturers with the products out there on the market, be it wax or wet, they are advising you to clean the factory grease off before you apply their lubricant for the best results. And properly cleaning a chain is certainly, as there's been, I guess, more focus and knowledge in this area, it's not difficult. So there are simple instructions to do that via solvent, or you can use the more fancy products like the stripper or ceramic speed UFO drivetrain clean. And now there's products like, say, strip chip coming out. But even with that, the fancy stuff, prepping a chain for either a top drip lubricant or wax lubricant, it is easy and it should be done anyway. I'm at a bit of a loss as to how that would be classed as a massive issue. With regards to properly wax it, again, that's not difficult. You pop the chain onto a pot and you turn the pot on and you swish it around when the wax is melted and hang it to set. In terms of things that are difficult in cycling, I don't class that as one of them. With regards to properly staying on top of the wax, again, that's not difficult, and there are also now a lot of great options to help with that. So if immersive waxing every time you need to relubricate your chain or re-wax, so for some that is easy and that is just their path, their immersive waxing. For others, re-waxing every single time they need to relube the chain, if that is going to be a little bit of a wax anxiety stress, then as we've covered quite a bit, just use a wax-compatible drip lubricant in between your re-waxings. So just use something like UFO drip, Silka Super Secret drip, True Tension Tungsten or Weather are, I guess, the main recommendations that get along perfectly with immersive waxing where you don't need to do any cleaning at all. They're running that really refined wax base that you can just use them with your immersive waxing, no issues. So you just simply would wax, relube the next, say, 5 times as per normal with a wax-compatible drip lubricant, and then do a re-wax, which is going to reset any of the contamination that has started to build up. And it is a whole lot easier doing that than it is to do, periodic flush clean maintenance with solvents or degreasers. And just, I guess, finally on that little bit, the overall premise about how it's sort of seemingly saying it's suitable just for, like, if everything's like ideal conditions. Again, that's one of the biggest myths and misconceptions to bust. In general, the harsher the conditions you tend to ride in, the more benefits you get from immersive waxing. If you're riding out there in the world of dirt and dust, there is no better path than running a true solid lubricant that is going to have the highest dust contamination resistance possible, because it's a solid that's been immersed all through your chain. And then when you re-wax, whatever small amount of contamination has managed to get in is reset across literally hundreds of mil of an immersive relubrication. Similarly, if you're frequently riding in the wet, water brings all the crap in, and if you don't take it out, it's basically going to be in there. So this is the big challenge for really all drip lubricants and frequent wet riding, or even infrequent. What do you do with the contamination that the water's brought in? You can either pay the piper with higher friction and wear, even if your next rides are in the sun, or you can flush clean it out. Or if you're waxing, you just re-wax. So everything has to be ideal kind of line and approach with regards to immersive waxing really does show a complete, I guess, from my perspective, lack of knowledge, lack of understanding of what immersive waxing does and why.
The other issue that I've got with it is that if the wax starts getting into your rear mech, in between the pivots and things like that, I've seen with some of that Wend wax back in the day, that being a problem, and then it just starts sticking.
Oh no, Wend was a proper wax. That stuff was horrible though. I don't think my research suggests that current waxing is not comparable to the Wend stuff back in the day.
Fair enough.
All right, I'm glad there was some clarification from the other host. As you know, from me, Wend wax is one of the all-time most terrible products released, and also most dishonest and misleading with regards to the claims. In all this time, I have never, ever remotely seen a case of where the immersive, what we class, say, M-Speed wax, hot melt, Rex, any actual immersive wax, say, other than Wend, where you're rubbing this shit on the chain and you're rubbing most of it on the side of your link plates, and it's all staying on the outside because it's a rub-on wax, not an immersive wax. How any excess wax flakes would possibly get into and gum up mech pivots is frankly beyond me. Now, I've been waxing personally for over 125,000 kilometers. I have never remotely seen anything like that. Never seen, obviously, anything when we had the workshop days going. Never seen or heard of it as an issue from any customer ever. So he must have just had a rather interesting experience with Wend, and then he has attributed that across to all of immersive waxing, which frankly is a weird thing to do.
And then my next issue with is hot waxing, where people take their chains off and dip them in wax baths and things like that. Fair enough if you want to do that. But from a bike shop or you guys or GCN or anybody online's perspective, you might cause yourself a lot of problem by recommending it, because Shimano, SRAM and Campag, the three main chain manufacturers, says you cannot reuse their split links. So
Really?
unless you're telling these customers that they have to put new split links in. Campag will go further and say you can't use a new split link on an old chain.
What?
So if you do this every week, unclipping your chain and clipping it back in, you suffer the risk of your chain failing, your split link. Now, I know there's going to lots of people are going to comment saying they've never had any issues, but I'm just saying that's fair enough. I'm happy for you, but I can't say that you can do it, because that opens me up to a massive professional liability lawsuit.
So, all right. So, I mean, on the one hand, there's a valid point there. In general, bike stores nor anyone should be just sort of recommending carte blanche that you can reuse single links and you won't have an issue, because we don't know that. Where you can't recommend directly against specific manufacturer safety instructions. So either, if one is waxing, which is something that is obviously easily guided through by those who sell immersive wax, you should be using an officially reusable link. So the YBN QRS links, which are compatible with most chains across 10, 11 and a lot of the 12 speed, are officially 5 times reusable. So that means if you're re-waxing, say, on average about every 300 kilometers for a road, reusing that link 5 times, then you're getting around 1,500 kilometers from a master link, or sort of times that by 6, that's around sort of 9,000 kilometers out of your pack of 6 links, which is fairly good. Whipperman Connects are also a more or less infinitely reusable master link. There are not always options though for some chains. So for sure, some of the 12-speed chains like SRAM Axis, you must use the Axis link, and they are single use. But again, it just shows the sort of the lack of knowledge. The recommendation is for those customers, if they're not comfortable reusing a single use link, and we don't push people into saying that, hey, yes, that's something you should do. What we say is, look, just do the combo approach. That is a very, very popular approach, where you wax, relube the next 5 times with a wax compatible drip lubricant, then do a re-wax to reset any contamination that is starting to build, and then just use a new link. You're still getting the huge majority of that super low wear, low friction, super clean benefits of immersive waxing. You're getting almost all of that as if you are immersive waxing all the time, by going the combo approach, and you're still only needing then to go to a new link fairly infrequently. And the wear rate savings you're getting from that path are going to massively offset whatever the cost of those links will be. The only exception really to that is Campy. Campy are Campy. Campy's stance on master links has always been pretty weird, which is why they've never had them for a very long time. And the fact that now they do have them for the new wireless 12-speed chains and also with ECAR, but in Australia they're costing like $25 to $30 a link. I mean, just what, Campy, what is up with that? So, for sure, I can't even recommend a hybrid approach necessarily for Campy if a link is going to cost $30, in which case immersive waxing may not be the path. It's a balance, because especially if you're on, say, ECAR and out in the world of dirt and dust, the cost of the ECAR cassette is pretty steep, so you really want the super low wear benefits of immersive waxing and wax strip lube. But it may just be that, look, running a top wax strip lubricant with some good periodic maintenance on bike with a product like Drivetrain Clean and a clip-on chain cleaner, maybe that's just the compromise you have to go to for Campy. But there's not a lot of that out there. I highly doubt he will have seen a influx of problems with Campy waxes that has sort of brought his attention to this in a negative way.
Yeah.
He's opened himself up to, he's opened them up to a massive lawsuit. So from my perspective, don't do it.
Right, so he pretty much then, I guess, just prior to that little point there, he went on about a 2-minute rant on master links. And so really he's sort of come to the conclusion that you should not immersive wax because of master links, which, again, in all honesty, like aside from Campy with their $30 links, in all other cases, you can either get officially reusable links or go the combo approach, which is still going to smash the pants off pretty much any sole, drip lubricant only approach. And you are just using the links once as per the manufacturer instructions. So he's kind of really thrown the baby out with the bathwater pretty big time. And I think he's really done that just, again, from a position of a lack of knowledge. I don't think he really understands at all just how much wear savings there are from immersive waxing, nor has he any thoughts at all, or has it crossed his radar with regards to using the top wax compatible drip lubricants with immersive waxing to resolve that issue or concern altogether.
You're going to use wax, use something like Squirt's drip wax, or wax your chain when you've just bought it, and then that's it.
And then
you don't
never
wax it again. Yeah, use the drip on wax.
It's a very interesting perspective that I've never heard anyone ever talk about.
Which is wild.
So I'm.
Now, obviously, I do find it pretty funny still that, in this day and age that someone thinks it's, it's pretty wild to immersive wax, that it's some batshit crazy thing. Obviously, with a lot of people who don't immersive wax, some will do excellent on-bike maintenance with their chosen, wet or wax drip lubricant. And also, there are many that do excellent maintenance by removing the chain to give it a proper solvent flush clean and a bath, which can really be the best path post, a lot of harsh conditions rides and so on. And so I don't know what, he likes to do, if he's just all cool to, have things running with a whole bunch of contamination in there. And again, I don't know if he's really just understood what the difference is between, contamination running in your lubricant and how much wear that does do in a component working so hard, as opposed to not having that in there. But yeah, I've always found the contrast different, especially from the early days of ZSC, where for certain people, periodically sometimes removing the chain to give it a proper solvent bath, flush clean, and then, put it back on and relube it, normal behavior. To remove your chain, to pop it into a bath of wax and swish it around in this lovely wax bath, batshit crazy. So I've always found that quite interesting. Now, with regards to the recommendation, I guess, on like if you're going to wax, just use Squirt. Squirt, you can certainly do a lot worse recommendations than just use Squirt. I think Squirt has been one of the, sort of all-time, every person, if you just need a go-to that is going to be, generally a really good option, then Squirt has been that option, and it's really cheap to buy. I guess the original version of Squirt, it didn't test amazing, didn't test terribly, or not even, I would say, poor. In my control test, which was a long time ago. And I know they've been working hard since then. But, it's a decent option. So some people do find that it does get a bit dirty and it does gunk up. And yes, you're going to need to do some maintenance. The main issue for me always with Squirt has been a bit that, I guess aside from those points, is that it did test with some penetration issues. So if you're only riding, in good conditions, where your maintenance for Squirt to keep things looking okay is fairly periodic, so you're not needing to worry about getting past that initial penetration issue again, then, it goes fine. In my view, there are obviously lower wear options, which may be of, interest, but it's a solid choice. The main issue that can come up with lubricants like Squirt, like Smooth, like Grax, and so on that have initial penetration issues is that if you do need to reset them fairly often because you've been out in a wet conditions ride or a bunch of harsh conditions, really dusty stuff, cleaning those is a bit tougher generally than the more refined wax drip lubricants, and then getting past that initial penetration again, it's a little bit more faff. So they just can be a bit more work, as opposed to some of the, the more fancy options these days. But no, if you're ever just in doubt and you don't know, it's I don't want to spend this much on a fancy drip lube, and I don't know if I should be running this random wet lube, Squirt, it's a solid recommendation. But certainly it doesn't compete with immersive waxing or the immersive waxing combo approach, where you're using that in conjunction with a compatible wax drip. So yeah, fun one. What was also fun, however, so now I put basically those main points in a actual, for me, really quite concisely worded comment, and it was extremely diplomatic, much more diplomatic than what I've just run through on this video. And I can't find it, so I think they've deleted it, which is a bit odd, and I've asked them where it's gone, but I haven't heard back yet. Further to that, so this comment that I put up here, so just stating that I put an informative comment up yesterday, checking for replies, and it's gone. Why was it removed? Somebody replied saying, oh, perhaps because you're biased, because you sell, Silka hot milk. Which I did reply back to them that, I sell everything that tests amazing. So the best wet lubricants, the best wax drip lubricants, and the best immersive waxes. So my bias is simply stocking what are the products that have genuinely tested as the best products through the most exhaustive and robust test that I know of. So, and that comment's also gone. So there seems to be some weird things going on with what comments they're deleting, which I gotta say for them is odd. So I would like to know a bit more, and I'll try to chase them up, because they were very, very diplomatic and factual. So it is odd they would delete something like that. Now, part of my comment was obviously to recommend them to watch just the Wax Life Like a Boss video, which goes through really, I guess, all the knowledge that Nick does not have and should probably have if he's going to go onto his channel and talk about waxing. I think, I try not to do it. I think I've done it here and there in the past where I've been, off base or incorrect because I've not had the knowledge on what I was talking about. So I try to obviously really minimize that. But definitely in this case, I think he's spoken very strongly about a topic that he has very little actual knowledge on, because he's written it off quite some time ago as don't do it. And he hasn't kept up with really anything that's been going on in this space for about at least 10 years. And I'd like them to get updated and perhaps just have a revisit of that. And if he still has the same opinion, that's cool. But I think it would be best to have an opinion formed on, having actually researched and reviewed the topic, as opposed to just talking off like that, really from a base of zero knowledge, in my view anyway, on immersive waxing and where things are at now. And lastly, just to reiterate, obviously, zero friction cycling is often really heavily tied to immersive waxing because it is a fairly big focus, but we are not all immersive waxing. The reason why immersive waxing is a heavy focus is simply because it has some unassailable advantages for your, wear rates and day in, day out cleanliness and so on, that drip lubricants really struggle to match. There is just, no getting around the fact that if you want the lowest wear, cleanest day in, day out drivetrain, immersive waxing is currently what is going to give you that. So, we are very much led, or I'm very much led in my recommendations as to what are the genuine best options for you for your lowest friction and cleanest path. And we've, tried to put out the best information with regards to immersive waxing and, how it's done, how easy it actually is, what you can do with regards to, say, the combo approach. And at the end of the day, all that information is there for you to make a decision on if that path is suitable for you. And if that path is not suitable for you, the good news is we have just done hundreds of thousands of kilometers of controlled testing on what are the best drip lubricants for you to choose from, be it wax or be it wet, so that you have the best known options to go to if immersive waxing is not your path. It's all there. So, the bias that we have is towards the best performing products and the best performing path for you. It is not a you must immersive wax or you're crazy. And it shouldn't be also from anyone else. If you immersive wax, you're crazy. So I hope that keeps some balance in things. Alrighty, this one's been, on the topic list for a while. I just never quite got to it. And I'm also behind trying to get a specific document up for this one on the website, so that there's a reference guide to be found. But certainly getting more and more emails these days with regards to people that are competing in a really ultra distance event. So it might be something like the Race Across America, or here in Australia, the Indian Pacific Wheel Race, or there's a whole bunch of really amazing, multi-day, many day events around the world. And people wonder, look, what's my best lubrication strategy to tackle this event? Because, good news is, people are starting to think that, wow, if I just, sort of ride thousands of kilometers and just keep adding lube, I could for sure finish the race on a chain that's many watts loss higher than the chain I started the event on. And how can I prevent that? So for such events, it is going to be a balance of compromises. There isn't a perfect answer for this one, but we'll, I guess, try to help guide against some of the, we'll say, common misconceptions a little bit, and suggest some things that may or may not suit you. You really will have to weigh these options up and decide what's best for you. Right, firstly, yes, it is generally best to start with a wax prep chain because, again, wax chains are going to be your lowest friction option in general, and they will stay that way for generally the longest period of time because they resist becoming contaminated. But one of the things that I guess people tend to gravitate towards then is what's the best lubricant for them to top up with once that the initial wax treatment starts to wear thin, and their initial thinkings will be a wax strip lubricant. Now, whilst that's generally brilliant for your day-to-day training at home where you can apply it and allow the set time overnight so that the carrier can evaporate off, you just don't really have that if you're doing a flag-to-flag ultra-distance event. If it's a stage race, then sure, that can still be great. Apply it at the end of your that day stage. You've got the overnight set until the next day. Sweet. But if it's something like a race across America or Indian Pacific wheel race or anything like that, where it is just you're taking whatever short breaks you can get away with before you're back on the bike and off and going, you just do not have the set time that the wax strip lubricants require. Some wax strip lubricants do claim some very impressive set times, like 10 minutes. I do not believe those set times. I will be looking to do a test of those set times once I've unburied myself a bit. But I would be not believing that unless you've tested that properly yourself. I think I mentioned perhaps last week that I don't think I've really seen that testing a 10-minute set time with them, those drip lubricants applied to chain metal completely exposed, and inside the chain, which is where you need the lubricant, there's not a lot of air exposure in there. It does take time. I think 10 minutes is extremely optimistic. So mostly for wax strip lubricants, you are looking at hours to overnight. And if they're not set, it really is quite not well established what the impact is going to be with regards to that lubricant's longevity and performance. And if it's not set, it's going to be gathering some higher level of contamination, possibly similar to a wet lubricant, as if you were just running a wet lubricant. And a bigger concern really for the wax strip lubricants that obviously usually around half what you're applying is a carrier that needs to evaporate. If the next stint of riding is going to be wet, without the set time, most times the water is what the actual carrier is for these wax strip lubricants. They will be washed out really quickly unless they are set. So your treatment longevity on a wax strip that you've just applied and then are riding out in wet conditions, they're not going to hang around long at all. So you would be needing to stop and reapply your wax strip very, very often if you're using that as your sort of now go-to lubricant if it's wet, because they just need that set time to be able to actually stay on the chain. So in general, for these long ultra flag to flag events, I do recommend moving to a top wet lubricant such as Silka Synergetic, Synergy, or Rex Black Diamond. Also Revolubes is a great wet lube. And again, no doubt there are others out there that we just haven't got around to testing. Nix Friction would also be a top option, I think. What obviously you want is something that's long lasting, and even if this event is an off-road ultra event, and that in general, I've been very against wet lubricants and the world of off-road because in general that is a mismatch of product to purpose. You are going to really just have to put up with the fact that yes, it's wet, yes, it's going to attract contamination. There's not really any getting around it, because if you put a wax strip on and then set off and ride, that's also going to be wet. So, and it's not going to be as long lasting as the longer lasting wet lubricants out there. So, unless your plan for the race is to stop and give it 12 hours to set, that's going to be slower by a fair bit than if you just put a top wet lubricant on and set off riding. And if over the next day or so it increases by a couple of watts of wear, that's just a penalty you have to pay for the type of event that it is. So these type of extreme distance events that are flag to flag, even if it's off-road, these are the rare cases where moving to a really long-lasting wet lubricant is definitely justified. It's just staying with a wax strip is not going to give you any advantage at all. And then the fun can really begin is, what if the conditions have been really harsh? So if you have been caught in some really wet, harsh conditions early on, no doubt about it, your chain will now be, comparative to when you started, a bit of a friction and wear nightmare, because a whole bunch of crap's been brought in, and adding 5 or even 10 mil of lube over the top of that, obviously that's going to help, but there's only so much it can do with regards to getting rid of the crap that's brought in there. Again, even if it's 10 mil that you're putting on your chain, you're putting on about 0.1 of a mil per link of lubricant to try to sort of, in theory, flush clear some contamination. And again, if I was to ask you to clean my chain post wet ride, and I gave you 0.1 of a mil of solvent or some cleaning agent to do so, you'd look at me kind of funny. So yes, obviously relubing generously post wet conditions, it will help. But there is no getting around the fact that your chain is going to be higher friction and higher wear, likely by multiple watts versus what you started with. So what can you do about that? So this is where, for me, I haven't done one of these because I don't know if I'd really enjoy an ultra distance event. For me, if I was to do one, I would personally pack a spare chain. I think a spare chain, I know, obviously pack weight and everything, you can get a bit out of control because everyone's telling you must pack this and you must pack that, and all of a sudden you feel like you need a Sherpa. But I think a chain is probably a pretty good one. Sometimes you might only be one crunch shift away or unlucky shift away from a bent link or a snap chain. And yes, you can repair it with a chain breaker, but often that means a shorter chain, and now you may not have access to some of the gears that you may really need loaded up going up some climbs. But also it kind of gives you some, I guess, a bit of an option that if you get caught in a really harsh wet day, that you can get through that, pop your now, spare fresh wax chain and go from, say, an 8 or 10 watt chain back down to a 4 watt chain, and hopefully carry on through until such time as you can get to your next local bike store where they can perform, even if they can just pop it in a container, blast some degreaser through it or a disc brake cleaner, which will evap pretty quick afterwards, blow it dry with a compressor, re-lube it with your chosen top wet lube, and you've done a pretty darn good reset for that. Now, it may take you some days or whatnot to get to a bike store, and then maybe you want to get both chains done. But it just gives you a bit of backup option. It could save you from, potentially a few days of riding with a chain that's 8 to 10 watts, when you could be back riding on a chain that's 4 watts, and then get things reset sort of fairly nicely. So, there's no real easy answers. I don't think in general, you could carry a small amount of, sort of solvent with you, like just a 100 ml shampoo bottle or something. That will obviously do a better flush clean than what you're going to get just by putting some drip lube on. But again, you've got to balance your pack weight and so on. So yeah, overall, across the whole event, you've got to think there's no way to really keep everything, finishing kind of where we started. It's about minimizing it for the most amount of time. If you get thousands of kilometers done in the sort of 4 to 6 watt range as opposed to in the 8 to 10 watt range, and you've been able to do so in a manner that's fairly easy by having a spare chain, getting a quick sort of bike store reset, that can really help, especially if you're sort of stopping at a town, you're ducking your bike store anyway and just getting some food from next door. It's stuff that can be sort of done whilst you're sorting out some other things. Now, and for sure, as you get really tired, halfway into the event and so on, even if it's something that if conditions have stayed great, just going to a fresh new chain halfway through, getting back to like a sort of 4 watt range chain from wherever your chain now is, can be just a little bit of a boost. And you will know that some of your competitors will have not really paid attention in this area. They'll be running a random meh lube. Some of them will be quite poor. And we have tested back with Friction Facts did some, but also I managed to get a whole bunch of chains post, my main test here sent to Flair when they were playing in the lubricant space, and they had a machine the same as what Friction Facts used. And the data was overall a bit interesting. We got a few lubricants tested. Some of the worst ones were up to 19 watts loss, after having completed the main test here. Friction Facts tested a whole bunch of chains post some events, like off-road events, and some of those chains had increased by around 6 watts loss. over a fairly short time. So they'd gone from like a 6-watt chain on a meh lube to start with, and they were 12 watts loss after the event, things like that. So for sure, there will be competitors that after, sort of 4,000 kilometers, they'll be finishing on probably at least maybe a 12 to 15 watt plus chain. And if you're, switched to a fresh chain halfway through, that's sort of back down to that 4 or 5 watts and finishing sort of around 6, because you're on a wax chain and then a really top wet lube, comparatively, that's pretty darn good. That's a bunch of watts every pedal stroke that's helping push you forwards rather than just going into eating through your stuff. So, it's not perfect. There's compromises, but you can certainly get the lesser of evils just by that little bit of sort of focus and planning on what you're going to do on that front. And mechanically, there's going to be obviously much bigger savings just getting this part optimized as practically as best as is possible for you, as opposed to what you would ever get with bearings and things like that. So in summary, yes, generally best, if possible, start wax, but no biggie if that's not practical for you. Just start with whatever top wax or wet drip lubricant you are, happy to run. That's really, say, anything in the top 15 on the league table should see you going great guns. Then move to a wet lubricant, because you just want to avoid faffing with the wax lubricant set times. And without the set times, they're not giving you any advantage. And some of the best wet lubricants do have very long treatment lifespans. So they're going to give you an advantage. You're putting 100% lubricant on with the top wet lubricants, as opposed to the wax strips. You're putting about 50% lubricant on and 50% carrier, which then really needs to evaporate, and you don't have time for that. I would personally pack a spare chain. It gives you some redundancy with regards to if it's wet, that you can then, hopefully just you get through that wet period. It is what it is. Then pop your fresh chain on so you're back to a super low friction chain. And then when you can, get to a bike store, get that chain reset so that it is ready to go. And then that's your backup one. Basically, at the end of the day, if you get caught in a obviously wet day or wet days on the chain that you've now switched to, you've got that other one reset, hopefully at least pretty well, that you can then switch to once the wet conditions have stopped. All up, you will finish the event with a chain likely many watts lower friction and wear than competitors who haven't done that. If it's a stage race, it is a whole lot easier. Obviously, you can pack a spare chain or two easy as, because you don't have to carry it with you on the ride. You can, if it's say a 7-day stage race, just switch to your fresh chain after say day 3 or day 4, even with your sort of, any whatever maintenance you're doing at the end of the day, and relube at the end of the day, ready for the next day. That's super. But again, you generally can't do a full reset during your stage race like you can at home with your sort of immersive wax pot. So just switching to a fresh chain halfway through it's just easy watts. Gets you guaranteed back to a super low friction point, to kick off the second half. So stage racing is a lot easier than these flag to flag ultras. All right, yeah, hope that made a bit of sense. And let me know what you think. Obviously, any other questions or concerns, pop them in the comments. I'm going to wrap up now and get ready for June 2. Yeehaw. And yeah, have a great weekend, everyone. I only just actually found out today it's a long weekend, so pumped about that. Super busy weekend with everything, because we've got both MotoGP starting and second round of Formula 1. So this is going to be a cracker. And yeah, time to get started. All right, talk to you soon and have a great time.